The email arrives on a Tuesday morning, just after 8 o'clock. I am at my desk, coffee still hot, waiting for the day to properly begin. I almost skip past it. The subject line reads, "Exciting news, announcing Harlow Advisory Group." The sender is Craig Harlow, my former supervisor, the man who left our firm 6 weeks ago. I open it. The first paragraph is the usual self-congratulatory talk. He has launched his own consultancy. He is thrilled about the future. He thanks everyone for their support. Then I reach the second paragraph. He is writing to announce that several clients have already joined him at Harlow Advisory Group. He lists them by name. One by one, I read through the list and my chest tightens with every line. I know every single one of those clients. Not just know them, I built those relationships. From the very first phone call to every late-night email and early morning follow-up across 5 years. Those are my accounts. My work. My trust. And at the bottom of the list, in plain black text, is the name of the client that makes up 43% of my annual revenue. I set down my coffee. My hands are completely still. But something inside me has gone very, very cold. I read the email 3 more times before I close my laptop. The first time, I look for a mistake. Maybe I misread the names. Maybe some clients were his before he joined Mercer. I check carefully. No. Every account belongs to our department. Every single one belongs to me. The second time, I look for an innocent explanation. Maybe he reached out after resigning and they chose freely. Except I know these clients. Most would never make that move without calling me first. Not one of them called. The third time, I am not reading the email. I am reading a memory. 4 weeks before Craig resigned, he called me into his office. He said he was doing a departmental audit for year-end reporting. He needed all client portfolios consolidated. He asked for my full spreadsheet, names, contacts, meeting notes, contract values. Everything. I sent it that same afternoon. I told myself it was routine. Supervisors ask for things like that. But sitting here now, I understand exactly what that spreadsheet was actually for. He did not ask for it to organize the department. He asked for it to build the client list for a firm he was already planning to launch. The sick feeling in my stomach confirms it. My name is Charlotte Williams. I am 34 years old and I have worked at Mercer Financial Partners for 5 years. Before that, I worked 2 part-time jobs while studying for my professional qualifications because my family could not cover everything. I learned early that nothing comes without consistent effort. I joined Mercer as a junior account coordinator. The client portfolio was modest when I arrived. Over 5 years, I built it, through showing up, learning what each client actually needed, and delivering reliably, quarter after quarter. I now manage 22 active accounts that represent a significant share of our division's revenue. The largest is Caldwell & Bright, an investment services firm that generates 43% of my annual billable income. I have managed them for 3 years. Their lead contact, Monica, trusts me because I do not waste her time. Craig's email names 11 clients from my portfolio. Caldwell & Bright is on the list. I think about the 5 years I gave this firm. The early mornings, the weekend emails, the moments I pushed through exhaustion because a client needed something urgently. I think about how none of it mattered to him. Then I stop thinking about feelings and start thinking about what comes next. Craig Harlow joined Mercer Financial Partners 3 years ago as a senior supervisor. When he arrived, I had already been here 2 years with a small but growing client base. Craig noticed quickly. Within his first month he pulled me aside after a team meeting and told me I was one of the most capable people in the department. He said he wanted to help me grow. I believed him. He mentored me, in his way. He copied me on senior emails. He brought me into meetings above my level. He introduced me to a few of his contacts. I was grateful and I worked even harder because of it. What I did not understand was what he was learning about me in return. He was watching how I worked. He was listening when I talked about my clients. He was noting which accounts performed strongly and which clients were loyal to me personally, rather than to Mercer as a firm. He was building a picture. And when the time came to leave, he already knew exactly which clients were worth taking. The mentorship was real in one sense. He did teach me things. But I was not the only one learning during those conversations. He was patient. He was calculated. And I trusted every bit of it. It was a Wednesday afternoon in mid-October. I remember because I had just come off a long call with Caldwell & Bright and was still writing up my notes when Craig appeared at my desk. He looked relaxed, as he always did. That relaxed manner was one of the things that made him easy to trust. He explained that leadership needed a full overview of every account across the department. Year-end forecasting. Resource planning. He needed each team member to submit their full client spreadsheet, names, contacts, contract values, relationship history. Everything. He made it sound completely routine. He mentioned 2 colleagues had already submitted theirs. I did not hesitate. I pulled up the master spreadsheet I had maintained for years, updated after every client interaction, holding every note, every preference, every piece of relationship history I had recorded. I sent it directly to his email within 10 minutes. Thanks, Charlotte. This is exactly what I needed. That was all he said. I went back to my notes and thought nothing more of it. The spreadsheet contained everything. Every client name, direct contacts, contract values, renewal dates, relationship notes, my personal assessment of each account's growth potential. It was essentially a complete manual on how to take my clients. And I handed it to him willingly. The first client cancellation comes 11 days after the email. Renfield Group, a property management firm I had worked with for 2.5 years. Their contact, Peter Addo, sends a short note saying they have moved their account to a new advisory firm. He does not name it. He does not need to. I call Peter directly. He picks up on the second ring, which tells me he expected my call. The conversation is brief and polite. He thanks me for the years of work. He says the decision was not about my performance. He says talks with the new firm began several weeks ago. Several weeks. Craig had not even resigned yet when those talks began. I ask one careful question. I ask if the new firm is Harlow Advisory Group. There is a pause. Then he says yes. Then he says something that stays with me. He says he assumed I was involved. Craig told him this was a joint move, that I had chosen to come along and my name would be on the new firm's materials. Peter thought I knew. I thank him for being honest. Then I sit quietly for several minutes. Craig did not just steal my clients. He used my name to do it. That evening I find Craig's company website. Clean and professional. Dark blue header. A confident logo. A short paragraph about the firm's philosophy, client-centered, results-driven, built on trust. Built on trust. I almost laugh. I click through to the testimonials page. The first is from Whitfield Industrial, a client I onboarded in my second year at Mercer. The testimonial praises Craig's team for their attentiveness and deep understanding of the client's needs. The contact who wrote it is Terrence, a man I personally introduced to Craig at a quarterly review 18 months ago. The second testimonial is from Caldwell and Bright. From Monica herself. I stop reading. My hands are not shaking. I want them to be, because shaking would mean I am processing and moving through it. Instead, my hands are still and my breathing is steady. I feel something colder than anger, a kind of absolute clarity. I close the laptop. There's a version of this story where I send Craig a furious message. Where I call him names or spend the evening making myself sick with what IFS. I do not do any of that. Instead, I open a fresh document and begin writing down everything I remember. Every date. Every conversation. Every detail. Because anger is loud. Strategy is quiet. I do not contact Craig. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not at all. I know people who would reach for the phone immediately. Who would confront, accuse, demand answers. I understand that impulse. But confrontation without preparation only warns the other person. It gives them time to adjust their story, move things around, prepare before you have organized your own position. I have been careful my whole life. I do not act on my first feeling when a situation calls for patience. So instead of calling Craig, I pull out a legal pad and write a timeline. The date he joined Mercer. Our mentoring conversations. The Wednesday in October when he asked for my spreadsheet. The date he resigned. The date his firm launched. The date the first client email arrived. The date Peter Addo told me Craig used my name. I write everything down in order, with dates. And then I remember something I had almost forgotten. When I joined Mercer 5 years ago, there was a standard onboarding pack. Contracts. Policies. Among them, an employment agreement I signed without much thought, the way everyone does when they are new and eager. But I remember one clause clearly. A 2-year non-compete. I need to know if Craig signed the same one. At Mercer, the non-compete clause is standard for all permanent staff at manager level and above. I know this because when I was promoted 18 months ago, HR sent me an updated employment agreement. The clause is clear. For 2 years after employment ends, a former employee may not solicit, contact, or engage with any client they worked with during their time at the firm.
Craig was a senior supervisor. He absolutely falls under that category. The clause also covers client data.
Any information gathered or accessed during employment, contact details, contract terms, financial records, is considered proprietary and cannot be used outside authorized firm purposes. My spreadsheet. My meeting notes. My relationship history. All classified as Mercer's proprietary data. Craig left Mercer on a Friday. His last official day was the 17th of November. I checked the internal staff announcement. Harlow Advisory Group launched its website on the 7th of December. 3 weeks later. 3 weeks after signing out of Mercer, Craig had incorporated a firm, built a website, published testimonials, and contacted clients he had no legal right to approach.
The non-compete was not a technicality. He had driven a truck straight through it. He signed a contract on his way in. He ignored it on his way out. That, I realized, would be his undoing. I go to HR on a Thursday morning. I do not storm in.
I sit across from Margaret Williams, no relation, a calm woman who has been in HR at Mercer for over a decade. I tell her I have a procedural question about Craig Harlow's non-compete agreement. I watch her face carefully. She is professional, but there is a flicker when I say his name.
Just a small shift.
She confirms, without sharing contract details, that all managers sign the standard agreement, which includes the non-compete provisions.
I thank her.
Then I tell her I received an announcement from Craig's new firm, and that it currently works with 11 clients from my portfolio. I tell her at least one client informed me Craig solicited them while still employed at Mercer. I place my legal pad on the table.
The timeline.
Dates, names, a summary of my conversation with Peter.
Margaret's expression changes. She says she will need to escalate this.
She picks up her phone and asks me to stay. Within 20 minutes, someone from Mercer's legal department walks through the door. And the way everyone suddenly moves very deliberately tells me that what I suspected is not a small matter at all. The legal team moves quietly and quickly. Over the following 2 weeks, they conduct an internal review. They pull communication records, access logs, and email history from the period leading up to Craig's resignation. They request my client records and submitted files from the past 3 years. Most critically, they ask for any documentation related to the spreadsheet.
I cooperate with everything.
I provide every record I have, including my timeline notes. And then I hand over something I had not initially thought of as evidence.
My sent inbox from October. There it is.
An email sent at 3:47 on a Wednesday afternoon.
From my Mercer account. To Craig's Mercer account.
Subject, Client Portfolio, Consolidated Overview. Attached, a spreadsheet titled Charlotte Williams, Full Account List. The legal team does not say much when I show them, but they ask me to forward it to their secure address immediately. I have kept every work email I have ever sent. Every single one, from my first day to now. Not because I anticipated anything like this, but because I learned early that documentation is the closest thing to protection that most working people ever have. My grandmother used to say, write it down, date it, keep a copy.
She never worked in finance, but she was absolutely right.
What the legal team uncovers is worse than I expected. Craig did not wait until after he resigned to contact my clients. The review finds he began reaching out in late September, nearly 2 months before his official last day. The emails are carefully written.
Not explicit recruitment.
Framed as personal check-ins and vague references to exciting developments coming soon.
But the dates tell the full story.
He was cultivating a client pipeline while still collecting a salary from Mercer. While still attending team meetings.
While still accessing firm-wide systems. There's also something else.
In 2 separate email threads, Craig makes indirect reference to a colleague joining his venture.
He does not name me.
But in a message to Caldwell and Bright's contact, he writes that his team will include someone the client already knows and trusts well. He used my reputation as a selling point without my knowledge or consent.
The legal team flags both threads. I sit in that meeting and listen as they walk through the findings.
I take notes. I do not show emotion, because I have learned that people take you more seriously when you stay composed.
What Craig did was not a gray area. Not an aggressive but legal move. It was a breach of contract.
Clear, documented, and apparently quite deliberate.
The letter goes out on a Monday morning.
Mercer's legal team sends a formal cease and desist notice to Harlow Advisory Group.
The letter is precise.
It identifies the specific clauses Craig violated.
It names the clients.
It references the emails recovered during the internal review. It demands that Craig immediately cease all contact with former Mercer clients and return or destroy any proprietary data, including my spreadsheet, in his possession. A written response is required within 14 business days. I am not copied on the letter but receive a summary from the legal team that afternoon. She tells me the firm is treating this seriously and that the evidence is substantial. I ask if situations like this typically resolve with a letter.
She pauses before answering. She says it depends on the response.
Craig's response comes 12 days later. I do not see it directly, but I am told his solicitor's reply contests the timeline, disputes the classification of my data as proprietary, and argues that client relationships were personal rather than professional. In other words, he denies everything.
And then does nothing to comply.
The cease and desist sits ignored.
Which means the next step is no longer a letter. It is a court filing.
And that changes everything. Mercer files in court 4 weeks after the cease and desist is rejected.
The claim covers 2 counts.
First, breach of the non-compete, specifically, the solicitation of clients within the restricted 2-year period. Second, misappropriation of proprietary data, using my client spreadsheet to identify and contact accounts in violation of Mercer's data ownership policies.
I give a formal statement as part of the filing.
I describe the October conversation, the spreadsheet request, my sent email, and my exchange with Peter Addo. I describe the website testimonials and the email in which Craig implied I would be joining his firm. The legal team tells me I am a strong witness because my records are complete and my account is consistent.
I appreciate the acknowledgement. But I am thinking about something else. Craig built a business.
He had clients, 2 employees, a website that talked about trust, and 2 small investors who put money in during the launch phase.
Filing a lawsuit is not the same as defeating someone. They can delay. They can appeal. They can run up costs until the other side gives up. But word travels fast in financial services. It is a smaller world than it looks.
And when investors hear the words breach of contract and court filing in the same sentence, they start asking uncomfortable questions.
It begins with a phone call I do not expect.
3 weeks after the court filing, my direct line rings at 9:30 in the morning. The caller identifies herself as Patricia, Operations Director at Renfield Group.
I know Renfield.
One of the clients who followed Craig after Peter Addo told them I was supposedly coming along.
Patricia is not a junior contact. She is senior leadership.
The fact that she is calling me directly means she has something to say that requires seniority on both ends of the call.
She speaks carefully at first.
She acknowledges that Renfield recently moved to Craig's firm. She says the decision was made quickly and perhaps without complete information. She has since learned the court proceedings are ongoing and has reviewed communications from Craig that, she says, appear more problematic in hindsight.
I listen without interrupting.
Then she says, we may have been misled about the nature of your involvement.
I already know this. Peter told me Craig implied my name was attached to the new venture.
But hearing it from Patricia, calm, senior, clearly uncomfortable, confirms something I needed confirmed. The clients are beginning to understand what actually happened. And some of them are not comfortable with how they were brought in. 2 days after Patricia's call, another client reaches out. Terrence, the contact at Whitfield Industrial, sends a brief email asking to speak privately.
He includes his direct mobile number. I call him that afternoon. Terrence is straightforward.
He agreed to write Craig's testimonial because Craig presented the transition as a collaborative, fully above-board move, one Mercer was aware of and I had been part of.
He had no reason to question it.
Since then, his company's legal team reviewed the contracts signed with Harlow Advisory Group in light of the proceedings.
They have concerns. He asks me directly whether there is a path back to working with Mercer. I do not promise anything I cannot deliver. I tell him I will raise the question with the right people.
I tell him his transparency is appreciated. Before we hang up, Terrence mentions he is not the only one asking these questions. 2 other clients he knows through industry circles have been having similar conversations about their position.
He will not be the last to call.
The word is spreading, not from me, but from the clients themselves. Trust unraveling from within. Craig thought he had the client relationships.
What he had was a spreadsheet and a borrowed reputation.
They were never the same thing. Inside Harlow Advisory Group, things are beginning to fracture. I have no direct view into Craig's operations, but in financial services, information travels through networks faster than most people realize. Within 5 weeks of the filing, pieces of a picture reach me through industry contacts. Craig's legal costs are rising.
The solicitor he retained is not cheap, and the case is substantive. Every stage of litigation requires responses, preparation, and hours. His firm was barely 3 months old when proceedings began. Firms that new are almost never financially stable. 2 of his 3 employees leave within the same 2-week period. One sends a brief message to a shared contact noting only that the environment had become uncertain and she had accepted another position. She does not say more. She does not need to. Then the news that changes everything. One of Craig's 2 investors withdraws their funding. The news comes through someone in the same investment circles. The investor conducted a second review after the lawsuit became public record. Active litigation and an unstable client base convinced them the risk was untenable. Without that funding, Craig has a serious cash flow problem. He went into this believing he had taken the most valuable parts of my work. What he forgot to account for was the cost of keeping them. The hearing takes place on a cold Thursday morning in February. I travel to the courthouse with 2 members of Mercer's legal team. I wear my gray suit because the right clothes steady you before a difficult day. We arrive 20 minutes early. Craig is already there when we enter. He looks different from the last time I saw him, at a departmental lunch 8 months ago. Then he was relaxed, confident, generous with compliments. He does not look relaxed now. He looks like someone who has been managing a crisis for months. He is, of course, because he has been. We do not make eye contact. The court has received extensive documentation from both sides. Mercer's team submits the internal review findings, communication records, and my formal statement. Craig's team submits their counterclaims. The judge reviews everything methodically. She asks focused questions about the timeline of client contacts, specifically, the emails sent while Craig was still employed at Mercer. Then she turns to the spreadsheet. She asks Craig's team directly when their client acquired the contact information for the accounts named in the filing. There is a pause before the response. In that pause, I watch Craig's solicitor glance toward his client in a way that tells me, the answer is not going to help them. The spreadsheet proves to be the center of everything. Craig's team argues that contacts were established through personal professional relationships and the data used to reach them was independently obtained. They use careful language and avoid the word spreadsheet where possible. But Mercer's team has my email. Sent on a Wednesday in October at 3:47 in the afternoon. From my Mercer account. To Craig's Mercer account. Attached, the full client list, with contact details, contract values, renewal dates, and relationship notes for all 22 of my accounts. Our legal team cross-references the contact details in Craig's outreach emails, recovered in the internal review, against the exact fields in my spreadsheet. Phone numbers. Email formats. Even an unusual phonetic spelling of a contact's name that I had recorded personally in a notes column. The same data. Not similar. Not coincidentally matching. Identical. The judge notes this specifically. She asks Craig's team to explain how their client could have accessed a phonetic note from an employee's personal spreadsheet column, unless that spreadsheet was the direct source. There is no good answer to that question. I do not smile. But I breathe slowly and steadily, and for the first time since I opened that email in January, something in my chest begins to release. The ruling comes 17 days after the hearing. The judge finds in favor of Mercer on both counts. On breach of non-compete, she rules that Craig's solicitation of Mercer clients beginning in late September constitutes a clear violation of the 2-year restriction he agreed to as a senior supervisor. The fact that active solicitation began while he was still employed and continued through the launch of Harlow Advisory Group makes the breach not technical but ongoing and deliberate. On misappropriation of proprietary data, she rules that the client spreadsheet, compiled during my employment and shared internally for authorized purposes, constitutes confidential firm property. Its use for client solicitation falls entirely outside any authorized purpose and represents a breach of Mercer's data ownership terms. The order is specific. Craig must cease all contact with the 11 clients named in the filing. Harlow Advisory Group cannot engage or contract with any Mercer client identified in the proceedings. Enforceable immediately. 11 clients. Those 11 accounts represent, by the financial figures submitted during the hearing, approximately 81% of Harlow Advisory Group's current active revenue. 81%. With a single ruling, the business Craig built on what he took from me has lost nearly everything it was constructed on. The contract he forgot about had finally caught up with him. Harlow Advisory Group does not survive the ruling. Within 3 weeks, it is over in any meaningful sense. The clients named in the court order, several already reconsidering since the filing went public, begin transitioning their accounts back to Mercer or moving elsewhere. The second investor follows the first.
Without revenue or outside funding, operational costs cannot be sustained.
The final employee resigns before the month ends.
Craig's solicitor files a notice requesting an extension. The judge grants a limited one.
It changes nothing material. I do not celebrate. That is not quite accurate. I do feel something when I read the final notice. But it is quieter than I expected.
Not triumph. More like the resolution of a long tension. The moment when you have been holding your breath for months and finally exhale.
I think about what it cost him.
Not just financially, though the legal fees, investor withdrawals, and lost accounts amount to something genuinely significant. I mean what it cost him in terms of who he chose to become when he decided that taking something was easier than earning it.
He was not a stupid man. He was simply a dishonest one.
And the contract he signed on his way out was exactly what ended him. 2 weeks after the ruling, Mercer's managing director sends an all-staff email. Carefully worded, as these things always are. It thanks the legal team. It acknowledges that client relationships are built on years of effort. It notes that recent proceedings confirmed the importance of protecting them.
My name does not appear in the body.
But there is a separate internal note distributed to senior management, which a colleague quietly forwards to me.
In that note, my role is acknowledged directly.
It states that the recovery process was initiated in part due to timely and thorough documentation provided by a member of the client services team.
It names me. I read the note twice.
Then I save it. 4 days later, I receive a meeting request from the managing director's office.
No subject line. Just a time and a room number.
I have had enough experience of workplace communications to understand that an unsigned request from the very top, arriving after a major legal win, is rarely bad news.
But I do not assume anything.
The moment you assume something good is guaranteed is the moment you stop preparing for it properly. I review my portfolio performance from the past 2 years. I compile account recovery numbers. I prepare a clean, single-page summary.
And I walk into that meeting ready.
The managing director's name is Robert Adeyemi.
He has been at Mercer for 16 years.
When I sit across from him and the head of client services, he goes directly to the point.
He tells me the firm owes me an acknowledgement.
The recovery of the 11 accounts would not have been possible without the documentation and cooperation I provided. My records were, in his words, the backbone of the entire case. Then he offers me head of client strategy. The position Craig once held, though he held it briefly and, it now appears, primarily as a staging ground. In practice, the role means leading our division's entire client relationship function, with oversight of the account team, involvement in new business decisions, and a seat at the senior leadership table.
My salary will nearly double. I do not react visibly.
I sit with the information for a moment, the way you sit with something important before responding.
Then I say yes. Clearly. Calmly. Without qualification. He extends his hand. We shake.
I walk out of the office and stand quietly in the corridor for a moment before heading back to my desk. 5 years.
Every early morning. Every late email.
Every careful record I kept because my grandmother told me to. All of it, finally, accounted for. The returning clients come back over about 6 weeks.
They do not all return at once.
Each account requires its own transition, its own paperwork, its own reset.
I handle most conversations personally.
These are people who trusted me, who were handed a false picture, and who, most of them, did not know what Craig had done until it was already done. Monica, from Caldwell and Bright, calls before our formal transition meeting. She says only that she is glad the situation is resolved and hopes we can move forward. I tell her I agree completely. I mean every word. I do not hold the departure against any client. That would be unfair and professionally counterproductive. They were deceived, the same way I was, just from a different angle. But I noticed something different in these return conversations.
A quality not always present before. They listen more carefully.
They ask more considered questions. There is a layer of attention that comes from having seen what happens when someone takes their trust for granted. I am no longer their account manager during these meetings. I am their department lead. The same clients whose names appeared in Craig's email are now sitting across from me in a different room, in a different context, with a very different outcome. People have asked me since what I learned from all of this. I think carefully before answering, because the easy answers are not the true ones. The easy answer is that good people win in the end.
That feels satisfying. But it is not precise enough to be useful. What I actually learned is this. Craig did not steal my clients. He tried to.
What he took was a spreadsheet and a head start. But the thing that made those clients valuable, the years of calls, follow-ups, and consistent presence, could not be copied into a document and emailed.
He had my data. He could not replicate my work.
The second lesson is about documentation. Not as a strategy for conflict, but as a basic professional habit.
Write it down. Date it. Keep a copy.
My grandmother's advice was not about lawsuits. It was about taking your own work seriously enough to record it.
And the third lesson stays with me most.
When Craig launched his firm, he believed he was taking the most powerful thing I had. What he underestimated was the contract he signed on his way in. He thought he was building a future using what I built. What he actually built was the evidence that he took it.
And that evidence brought everything back.